Hello and welcome back to another episode of World History. Today we will be covering the Sub-Saharan trade in Africa. Let's get down to it.
At the end of every unit, your teacher has the chance to teach a lesson about other lessons and their context to enhance. But what do you suppose our teacher has us do? He skips the lesson and makes us present a digital LEQ. LEQ needs historical evidence, reasoning that can corroborate in advance. A complexity says that Dr. John P. Irish would admire, then we drop this screencast like a single that is fire. Student-created screencast for you to like, subscribe, and share. We know you've had all the John Green, and it's the Heimler you can bear. If we have the most views by 10 p.m. Eastern on the 15th, we earn 500 bundle points, which virtually guarantees an A. Without much more, for fair or ado, we present our digital LEQ.
Before we begin, we would like to ask to you two ideas. First off, what major changes affected the Sub-Saharan trade as well as the empires in the surrounding region? And what was the most important continuity over time from the Sub-Saharan trade? These ideas will be explored later on throughout the video. Between the years of 300 BC and 1100 BC, the Sub-Saharan trade routes were created. The trade routes were in the Sahara Desert, but also went through South Africa as well. Empires such as Ghana and Songhai used these trade routes. Then, Morocco started controlling the trade routes. The goods that were traded along the Sub-Saharan trade routes were textiles, ceramics, salts, and beads. Empires traded these goods in exchange for gold, cloth, and slaves. The Sub-Saharan trade routes were beneficial to many empires such as Mali and Ghana, which gained a lot of wealth. Between the time period of 1450 and 2000, the Sub-Saharan trade routes were a massive network with the exchange of primarily gold, salt, and slaves. However, the Sub-Saharan trade routes were faced with new adoptive uses of caravans, and the rise of the Islamic religion changing government policies, forever altering the trade routes. Therefore, the Sub-Saharan trade routes encountered greater changes than continuity. The bauxite gold dust used in the Sub-Saharan trade routes were seen as a great source of economic wealth. In North America, there was no gold to mine, so you needed to trade with North Africa in order to attain it, a new policy that was implemented once Islam took over. The following excerpt from Ancient History Encyclopedia states, routes would shift over the centuries like the sand dunes of the desert as empires rose and fell either side of the Sahara, and as new resources were discovered that could be exploited in a trade that never ceased. Due to the new resources being explored, caravans eventually switched over to adapt to new trades. The fortified towns along the Sub-Saharan trade routes were constantly being built. The excerpt from the Nordic Conference states, the conditions of trans-Saharan trade changed remarkably after northern Africa became a part of the Islamic world in the late 7th century AD. The vast Umayyad Caliphate reaching from the slopes of Paris to the banks of Indus formed a solid market area, the monetary system of which was based on gold. However, the Muslim rulers in the West struck their own golden dinar. Once Islam arose in Africa to take over the trans-Saharan trade routes, their new governmental policies quickly altered how trade was performed. The image of the camel saddle showed an invention that helped with the transportation of goods along the trans-Saharan trade routes. During sub-Saharan trading, this instance of technology was continuously innovated to adapt new trade materials and voyages. The quote from Slavery and Remembrance states, thus, its traders forged new trading links, providing goods from Europe and the East, which Africans exchanged for exports including slaves. African societies were ensnared by the foreign slaves on the trading routes and forcibly marched in camel caravans across the Saharan desert, often enormous distances to markets in the north. While the trading of African Americans was a continuity across the trans-Saharan trade routes and all trade routes, the trading of Africans by Africans became a drastic new change across the New World that would impact it for years to come. Key elements featured in the trans-Saharan trade route were economic systems, technology and innovation, and cultural developments and interactions. More trade routes were created to increase trade and stimulate more economic growth, a perfect example of how economic systems act. The camel saddle was a change in trade that helped with transporting goods and innovation on current technology at the time. The religion of Islam